Your predictions absolutely came true. You had said that November, December, when nobody's expecting it to start, it will start again. So, astrologically, what could be the outcome for India for any wars that could occur in the future?
I do expect some really problematic things to happen that I'm very, very clear about from the charts. It is going to be a very tumultuous decade ahead. It just does not seem to be good from the standpoint of peace.
So recently there was a pact between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. What can we astrologically conclude out of this pact between these two countries? So can U.S.A. under Donald Trump's regime have anything to do, or affect the dynamics between India and Pakistan? Namaste, this is Preetika Rao. Welcome to the channel that trended Astrology Podcast in India with an aim and mission to introduce you to only the best astrologers in the country. Abhigya, I welcome you once again on my podcast. Jai Shri Krishna.
Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Krishna ji.
So, we are here once again to discuss the serious topic about the tensions between India and Pakistan and, of course, what 2026 holds astrologically for both these countries. Let's not forget that on the 12th of May, you on your channel in 2024 had predicted that there could be major tensions, especially at the borders between India and Pakistan. And your prediction came true on the 22nd of April 2025 with the Pahalgam attacks in Kashmir. And then we had a podcast in May 2025 where you told me that this is not it. There was Operation Sindoor, there were firings from both the ends at the borders, and then of course there was a ceasefire agreement between the two countries which was dishonored by Pakistan. But then we consistently saw peace for the last few months. But then suddenly with the Lal Killa Delhi car blast that took place a few weeks back, your predictions absolutely came true. You had said that November, December, just when we would expect that everything is fine and when nobody's expecting it to start, it will start again, and it did. So the big question now, what does India and Pakistan astrologically see in future? Is it like the same identical scenario repeating that we saw in the past few months, like firings at the borders, or it can escalate further this year?
Yes, very much, in fact, because the Indian subcontinent as a whole, the more I have been studying it over the last couple of months, the more complex it becomes from the standpoint of Jyotisha. And one thing that is very clear across themes, across charts, across perspectives through astrology is that it is going to be a very tumultuous decade ahead. It just does not seem to be good from the standpoint of peace. It is very conducive to strong bouts of violence on both sides and tremendous danger. That is very clear. And out of that shall rise beautiful India. Of course, that is a topic for another day. But it does not look very good. And every major power in the world has gone through a violent transition phase, and we are right in the midst of that. We are right in the middle of the storm, the eye of the storm at the moment. So it would be very naive to expect that things are going to calm down over the next couple of months. And apart from that, from an astrological standpoint, it just does not look good. We're right in the middle of a problematic time frame. But at the same time, as I did reiterate my previous podcast with you as well, is that I don't expect an all-out nuclear war where millions of people, of course, would die. That's not exactly what we expect, but something very close to that, something that is dangerously close to that scenario seems very likely, and especially over the next couple of months, because the kind of problematic astrological energy that started the year off, that kicked off the year in the Chaitra Shukla Pratipada for the whole world, it was a very tumultuous combination, and I don't feel we have seen enough of it yet. And so far, we have seen just about 60 to 70% of what has to be seen. And as the viewers might know, a lunar year in Vedic Jyotisha goes between the Chaitra to Chaitra cycle. So it will be there till about the 18th of March next year, depending on different time zones in the world. So we are yet to see about 30 to 35% of the problems globally in the next couple of months. And I expect something to again begin, a new conflagration before March of 2026. And this I am very, very confident about, which is why I reiterated it last time as well, that force humanity into violence. And especially since we have some very self-destructive and absolutely terrorizing neighbors around us, the possibility of violence is way more heightened. So there is going to be some really horrible things that will happen over the next 1 decade. And yes, other powers will support Pakistan. There will be some support even for India throughout this from around the globe. But around 2029, these alliances will become more forged, and they will be more clearer to see. And as far as I can see, I do not. It is going to be disastrous in some ways, even for India. That's very, very clear. I must say that, but we must not lose hope as a country. And since the outcome is going to be positive for not only this generation, but even the generations to come. And what we saw in 2025 was one of the biggest conflagrations since 1971. Nothing of this sort, aerial dogfights with several dozens of jets. We haven't seen something like this since 1971. But as I mentioned in my 2024 video, that we're going to see 1971 all over again, this time it's not going to be as fast and quick as it was in 1971. There are going to be two more events. The first one would be very fast, as we saw in the earlier part of this year. The second one, sometime before March of 2026. And the third one is somewhat protracted with a series of moves, both pro as well as anti India moves by the neighbors, which would ultimately culminate in a sort of major escalation in the just late 2029 and early 2030s.
Which are the countries you see as a possible threat to India? Because we've already seen that US gave a huge amount of funds to Pakistan, and we are all fearing that these funds will be severely misused for anti-social activities against India. So, does US have any role to play here, or is it going to be Saudi Arabia this time? Because US and Saudi Arabia are now, especially with Donald Trump and his, ties with Saudi Arabia getting stronger, there is a kind of backing that, both the countries have with each other. Is it going to affect the India-Pakistan scenario too?
Yes, definitely. Every rising power in history has faced tremendous opposition. This is since time immemorial, and definitely there will be an involvement of the United States. Logically speaking, it is a modern day empire and has its posts around the world, its geopolitical pawns and chess players all over the world. So yes, there will be a huge involvement. Initially, it is going to be probably against India, and eventually, as and when it realizes that the resolve of the Indian population, as well as the tides of time, are more or less supporting India, it would make a late stage shift towards India around 2027 and once more around 2029. The initial support that it apparently is giving to Pakistan, it will realize soon that that was not a very good idea. Unfortunately, they're basically repeating the same mistakes they made with the Nixon administration, and I think they will realize that very soon, hopefully. And around 2029 to 2030, we can expect that these alliances will be more firm. And as we discussed in the previous podcast, well, China specifically, um, as I mentioned earlier, would try to be more neutral as time passes and start to stay away from Pakistan as it realizes that it's a sinking ship in many ways. Diplomatically, it would try to distance from Pakistan, or it would try to ensure that Pakistan does not engage in war with India, because that would prove disastrous for China's interests as well. And they would move away towards neutrality, and in some ways might even be supportive of India's economy as time progresses. So that also makes sense, looking at the combinations that we see. But nothing is going to happen without very, very significant effort that we make as an Indian population over the next 1 decade. That's going to determine our future for the next 40 or 50 years easily. So, yeah, or I would say even 100 years.
So recently there was a pact between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. What can we astrologically conclude out of this pact between these two countries?
That is a very important question. But in history, we have seen that diplomatic relations with several countries does not always guarantee military success. In fact, sometimes it can even be to the contrary, and we have seen this pattern like so many times. Several defeated forces in history have been well connected and well networked with several powerful states, and yet they've lost major wars and battles. So while that is an alarming situation, the consequences of this are going to be bad for both Saudi Arabia as well as for Pakistan. It's going to be terrible. Both of them have, of course, entered into this because of huge insecurities and because of Saudi Arabia's recent diplomatic isolation. But I do expect, looking at the way the charts are, especially after 2029, for this to be quite disastrous actually, even for Saudi Arabia. So unwittingly, they might get into something really worse than what they thought it to be. So yes, that seems very likely. And just around 2029 to 2031, this could prove very negative for both of the countries. So one very important thing that I noticed in the global patterns, as I was studying Jyotisha, the rise and fall of nations, is that large monarchies with tremendous economic power being concentrated in the hands of very few people do not last very long. And even if they do, they need tremendous support externally as well as support from the citizens within. Now, Saudi Arabia has been able to balance this for decades now because of tremendous oil wealth. But still, most of that is concentrated in the hands of a few, and prosperity flows. So we cannot expect that to stay in the hands of the Arabs as well for very long. They have seen this prosperity for about 80, 90 years now, and it is finally time, around the 80th year, it's finally time for that prosperity to start moving away. And that is unfortunately not going to happen in a very peaceful manner. There's going to be some huge regional threats for Saudi Arabia, power struggles as well in between 2029 and 2030, more specifically around 2033, because that's when the petrodollar system kind of begins to crumble as far as I can see. So there will be a fight for geopolitical dominance over the Middle East between the multipolar world at that time, in my humble opinion. So yes, there is going to be something very problematic around 2033 as we complete 60 years of the petrodollar system. So specifically about Saudi Arabia, it doesn't look good at all. And on the other hand side, Egypt is going to see some huge changes over the next couple of months itself. That's also not going to be very conducive to Saudi Arabia. And of course, in the midst, we have the entire Israel situation as well, which is going to play right into the hands of Saudi Arabia's downfall specifically. So, yes, that's how I would put it.
So the recent blast that happened in Delhi, it's linked to Turkey and, to a whole lot of nexus across the world. Do you see astrologically Turkey also having some kind of hand in what happened between India and Pakistan, or what happened at the Lal Killa blasts in Delhi?
Yes, there will definitely be foreign involvement in this. Bharata and the Indian subcontinent as a whole houses over 25% of the global population. So it is definitely clear that there will be foreign involvement, considering the rising stature of this entire subcontinent in global geopolitics, and especially that of India. And any country that gets involved with, specifically with Pakistan, and the radical nexus that is being developed in the Indian subcontinent, any power that aligns with this nexus will undoubtedly suffer tremendously. And hence, it would be wise for these countries to avoid such disastrous partnerships. And yes, in the recent attack as well, this attack was supposed to be something very horrendous on a larger scale, and by the efforts of our brave hearts and of our soldiers, as well as of the agencies that work day and night tirelessly to protect us, we have been saved from a cataclysm. The kind of the scale of what was just supposed to happen was tremendous. We should be, first of all, very thankful, and second of all, beware the of the dangers around us. And now we're surrounded by some of these very unfriendly and horrible neighbors, and we have to be very, very careful. The good news, however, is that since whatever happened in Bangladesh is very well known to the most of the country, as well as every one of our agencies is on high alert, even on the eastern front. The danger from Bangladesh specifically is going to be limited at least until March or April of 2026. However, after September of 2026, Bangladesh will begin to initiate a few anti-India actions, not directly militarily, but in other manners. This is after September of next year, and gradually it will escalate to the point around 2029 to 2031. But direct military confrontation between the two countries is likely, but at a limited scale. And the positive thing amidst all of this that I can see is that over the next two generations, slightly longer term look at this, around 2030, 2040, and 2050, the next two generations will detach from these ideologies. That is something I see happening.
So, astrologically, what could be the outcome for India for any wars that could occur in the future?
Astrologically, I see that the outcome overall for the Indian subcontinent is going to be terrible. There are going to be bloody conflagrations, and especially from Pakistan and Bangladesh, there'll be a lot of self-destructive moves as well. Um, so it does not look very good from a purely humanitarian standpoint, and this is what I mentioned even in 2024. We're going to see huge refugee crisis and pain, disaster that follows wars in general. Um, there will be a lot of moral obligations that each country would have in this, and I think India, unfortunately, would take up some of these obligations on itself, like it did in 1971, taking in so many refugees, which is now haunting us as a country in many ways. But those kind of situations are going to happen over the next few years as well. And as the decade closes, 2029 to 2032, it's going to be even more clearer to us, and it's going to be very, very strong. And as we speak, Bharata is going through something called the Bhramari Dasha. It's a sequence of the Yogini Dasha, and the last time this happened, we had a major escalation in around 1989 onwards in the Kashmir region, insurgency, which was far more harmful, debatably, than the 1971 war as well, since it was deep into India, and there were several attacks, one after the other, and an entire sleeper cell of terrorism throughout the Indian subcontinent was established in those few years following 1989. Thousands of Hindus were killed in this period, and the Kashmiri Pandits were completely displaced from their place in Kashmir. Demographic changes ensued, and terrorism really struck the heart of India. And all of these things happened post 1989, and something like that is coming once again, but this time we'll be able to handle it better. And unfortunately, from a humanitarian standpoint, it does not look good. From a geopolitical standpoint, it looks very good for India. So if the outcome is regarding the geopolitical outcome specifically, I would see it as being positive in the longer run. This would give birth to a more prosperous Bharata with more clearer guidelines. And this war, it might seem very strange I'm saying this, and of course, I would not like to say this, but this war and this overall situation will prove a catalyst to India's legal framework transformation, which is very, very important. The way we are running on archaic laws and an archaic system that is very similar to the colonial extractive system has to change, and for that to change, there has to be a fundamental shake-up, and those important transformations happen often during wars. So I would see this as a positive window of opportunity for Indians to come together and change the fundamental legal and the framework that has been holding us back from real progress and prosperity. And in fact, even corruption as such is likely to decline rapidly after this major war occurs, since again the frameworks would change because of it. This is going to be a tremendous upheaval, and while I would not personally look forward to all of this terrible transformation, I also feel in the interests of Bharata, ultimately this is going to be good.
So November, December is usually a holiday season where people are making plans, they're traveling to different countries, and of course there are a lot of celebrations and weddings and all of that that takes place, especially in these months in India and everywhere else. How difficult is November end or December going to be for India in terms of Pakistan? Is there some kind of warning that you want people to be careful, and are they supposed to drop all plans and be alert, or can they just move ahead and go ahead with their normal plans?
I think it is going to be a problematic few months, especially towards March of next year. That is very, very clear. November and December are also quite problematic, but um, canceling plans, I don't think that would be necessary, particularly as far as I can see. Um, I think it's not going to be that problematic. But yes, I
Okay.
think it would be better to avoid travel in war zones. That's just a general statement. So yeah.
So to conclude, if you have to summarize the next 2-3 years for India and Pakistan relations in one astrological sentence, what would it be like?
Tumultuous, destructive, transformative, and fundamentally altering the internal structures of the entirety of the Indian subcontinent. That's how I would put it. The next 2 to 3 years are very significant, specifically the next few months and the next 1 year. And even more significant is 2029 to 2031. So during these two time frames, we're going to see all of this happen. And it really looks like a tremendous transformation. That's how I would put it. And the thing here is that the more you try to learn about something, especially as complex as Jyotisha, the lesser you seem to know at the end of the day. And I'm exactly in that moment at this point. I've seen hundreds of charts by now, different eras, different centuries, especially related to the Indian subcontinent. And initially, it seems flabbergastingly confusing. And as and when you go deeper and deeper into it, you start to see some patterns. I'm just beginning to observe these patterns. And the more I get familiar with them, the more with Bhagwan's will, I get enlightened with them.
Right, I agree. Thank you. And I would once again like to remind my audience that whatever you see on this channel is purely astrological debate or astrological discussions that's happening. There are no personal opinions or bias out here. It's purely astrology. Considering the Chaitra Shukla Pratipada Horoscope of India taken for 2025 and 2026, and based on these grounds we make our predictions. So if you are an astro enthusiast, you can subscribe to my channel. Like I said, we trended Astrology Podcast in India. And Abhigya Anand, thank you so much once again for
Dhanyawad,
being
dhanyawad,
on
dhanyawad.
this.
Thank you.
Jai Shri
Jai
Krishna.
Shri Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna.